Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and this is the 14th episode in our Murdaugh series. We're back with Murdaugh, and before I get into it, I got a Patreon global celebrity to shout out today, and that is Miss Jeanette Grimes. And Jeanette is from Melbourne, Florida. And Melbourne, y'all, is southeast of Orlando, Florida. And if you're a fan of art, that is what Melbourne is known for. There are some amazing art galleries there, and it's also home to the beautiful Indian River Lagoon. Welcome to the Patreon, Miss Jeanette, and thank you for supporting. For those interested in early commercial-free episodes, bonus episodes, and incidentally, we have a great one coming Friday just for Patreon celebrities on Casey Affleck's lost lawsuit. You get that, a ton of other benefits you can get also on the Patreon site. Check us out, patreon.com/exposedpodcastfiles. So let's get into it. In the last time we left you, we were in the first day of testimony in the Murdaugh trial. And I played some of that testimony for you, and we discussed it as I went through. So there's going to be a similar format today. But I'm not going to play all 70 witnesses in this trial during this series. It's just too much to cover. And some of these witnesses, it's not really key stuff. So I'm just going to cover the ones that made a big impact. And I'm going to summarize the rest of them. So also testifying on day one was Tanisha Bryson Smith. She was the Hampton County 911 dispatcher that talked to Murdaugh initially when he called 911 and actually routed his call through to Captain Angela Stallings, who also testified. That was the Colleton County 911 dispatcher. Also testifying on day one, Fire Chief Barry McRoy. He responded to the scene, and what he did created a little bit of controversy. He covered those bodies with sheets. Now, the reason he did this, obviously you had family arriving on the scene, not only Murdaugh, but his brother arrived on the scene, and it was out of respect, really, and he didn't want these people to see these bodies like this, but it created a problem because detectives hadn't arrived yet to do their whole CSI thing on all this. And when you cover the body with a sheet before that happens, you take a risk of contaminating DNA. So after the fire chief testified that he did indeed cover the bodies with sheets, Captain Jason Chapman took the stand. He was with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, and the defense did a good job of kind of pushing him to say that he didn't want those bodies covered with sheets for obvious reasons that I just explained. So they recessed for the day, and the next day, which was Friday, January 27th of 2023, they had three more witnesses. This is day two of the trial. First up was SLED agent Melinda Worley. She was a criminologist, and she was the one that actually created the crime scene diagram and presented what is known as the SLED report. They talked to SLED agent Delia Cicerion, and she transported Maggie's cell phone, but she didn't put it in what's known as a Faraday bag, which is like an evidence protection bag. And that was a problem that came out in day two of the trial. But what stuck out to me the most after day two, and what we're going to focus on today, was the testimony of Detective Laura Rutland of the Colleton County Sheriff's Office. And you may remember way back when, in one of the very first episodes, I covered Alex Murdaugh getting questioned on the scene inside that vehicle. And there was a female detective there with the male detective, and that female detective was indeed Detective Laura Rutland. So we're going to focus on her testimony today. And Laura Rutland was a detective with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office who was not only as sharp as they come, but she was also a true crime podcast fan, which is pretty awesome. It actually came up during the questioning, and you'll hear that. So much so that it's what led her to become a detective. Now, in her questioning, the assistant prosecutor led the questioning, and his name was John Metter. And in addition to having that Southern charm that you would picture of a Southern lawyer, he is also the most experienced prosecutor in the entire state of South Carolina as it relates to murder trials. So let's look into the crime scene from Detective Rutland's eyes, and I'll give you my thoughts on this after this line of questioning wraps up. But here's the prosecution questioning Laura Rutland.
Your Honor, this time the state of South Carolina calls Detective Laura Rutland.
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. You affirm the testimony about to give the court in this trial shall be the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Take a seat on the witness stand. State your name again. Spell your last name.
My name is Laura Rutland, Rutland.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
Nobody's watching. You are Laura Rutland.
I am.
Please tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury about Laura Rutland, where you're from, where you were born, where you lived, and a little bit of your background leading up to law enforcement, please, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. When I was about 6 months old, my family moved back to England, where we were originally from. Lived there until I was about 3 or 4 years old. Came back to the United States. Grew up in Somerville, South Carolina. Graduated from Somerville High School. After I graduated, I was working as a dog groomer. Met my would-be my husband. We moved to Port Royal, South Carolina. He was in the Marine Corps, stationed at Parris Island at the time. Then we moved to Bluffton. We had decided, I decided to pursue law enforcement. I've always been a true crime nerd, into mysteries and things like that, so I decided to pursue law enforcement. I graduated from the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy in 2010 and was working at the Bluffton Police Department, where I held various roles. Started on patrol, became a detective, then I was promoted to supervisor, where I supervised a patrol shift, and then eventually supervised the detective unit at Bluffton PD. My husband and I decided we wanted a lot of kids. So after I had my third baby, I decided to try my civilian job, get out of law enforcement for a little bit with a better schedule. So I briefly worked on Parris Island as a sexual assault victim advocate for the Sexual Assault Response and Prevention Program. Realized I missed law enforcement, so I wanted to get back. So, especially investigations. I first tried Beaufort Police Department, but it would take several years for them to have an opening in criminal investigations. So then I came to the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, where they were seeking experienced detectives. And so I joined Colleton County Sheriff's Office in September 2020. And February 2021, I was transferred to the Criminal Investigation Division, where I currently am now. My main focus is child crimes, which means children of sexual and physical abuse. Those are the cases that I predominantly work, as well as I'm a South Carolina ICAC task force member. And what that means is it's Internet Crimes Against Children, and that's a task force that's partnership with the Attorney General's office. And we basically battle online child predators, child pornography, those types of cases. We do rotate homicides in the detective division among 9 of us.
At some point, did you work at Parris Island?
I did, yes, sir.
Tell these folks what you did there.
I was the sexual assault victim advocate for civilians on the base.
And your training in law enforcement's been what, detective?
It's been various things. It's been basic training to advanced training, you name it. I've attended several advanced trainings hosted by other law enforcement agencies, state and federal.
How many children do you have now?
We have 4.
Okay. And does your husband work?
He does.
Does he work at home?
He does. Mm-hmm.
So you started full-time with Colleton in what year?
2020.
Okay, and what was your role when you first started with Colleton County Sheriff's Department?
I started on patrol to familiarize myself with the county.
And then did you work yourself, or not work out, but you become a detective?
I did, yes.
Okay, when was that?
February 2021.
On June 7th of 2021. Well, let me ask before you get there. Where do you, not to pry, don't want the world to know, but they're going to, where do you live?
I live in Ridgeland.
Now, on June 7th of 2021, were you on call?
I was.
Okay. How far is it from Ridgeland to here?
45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic and what part of Colleton County I'm going to.
Did you receive a call to respond to a double homicide?
I did.
Okay. And where was that? Where were you supposed to respond? Okay.
Initially to the scene, 4147 Moselle Road, but due to my long commute, it was better that I stopped at the sheriff's office first and I be the one to prepare the search warrant for the property.
And who were you coordinating with during that? I mean, who was your boss?
That's Captain Jason Chapman.
And after you'd received the call, did you confer with Captain Chapman?
I did.
Okay. And as a result of that, what did you do?
I went to the sheriff's office, prepared the search warrant, was finally able to track down a magistrate. I had to wake him up out of his bed to sign the warrant, and I was able to secure a search warrant for the property.
Okay. And for 4147 Moselle?
Yes, sir.
What did you do after you got the search warrant?
I notified everybody over the radio that I had the search warrant signed because I wasn't sure if the SLED crime scene unit was waiting on me, and it was still going to take some time to get out there. And then I made my way to 4147 Moselle Road with the warrant.
Had you been out there before to 4147 Moselle?
Never.
When you went out there, did you know what your role was going to be as you were going out there?
I did not.
When you got to the scene, tell us what happened.
So when I pulled up, I noticed there were several SLED agents as well as Colleton County deputies at the scene. I was basically the last one there. And I met with my supervisor, Captain Jason Chapman, and presented them with the search warrant as well as SLED. He asked me if I knew the Murdaugh family, to which I replied I did not. They then asked me if I was familiar with a boat accident that had happened in Beaufort, and my reply was, I've heard of it, but I don't know the details. So with that information, they said, okay, you're going to be assigned as the liaison with the lead SLED agent on the case, who was identified as Senior Special Agent David Owen, and that my task was going to be to assist him with anything he may need that evening at the scene and throughout the investigation.
And I think we've heard prior testimony, but the case was turned over to SLED because of a potential conflict. Is that
That's
your
correct.
understanding?
That was one of the things my captain advised me of when I arrived with the search warrant. He advised me that SLED was going to be the lead agency on the case.
And did you know Special Agent David Owens prior to that night?
I did not.
Okay. But did you get to know him and actually get to work with him some?
I did, yes, sir.
And let's start out with that job. When you first got to 4147 and you got your instructions, who were you going to work with, what were your observations? Tell these folks what you saw.
So the first thing as I approached I'm sure you've all heard the kennels, was the overwhelming smell and a lot of water on the ground by the kennels. And then the first body that I approached was the deceased male. He was laying face down at an angle with his feet inside the plane of the door. There was obvious trauma to the top of his head. He was covered with a sheet, but I could still see the top of his head from underneath the sheet. Obvious trauma. There was brain, blood, hair, skull matter, all within the feed room and the ceiling. There was a deceased female, approximately 30 feet across from where his body was, and she was covered as well. But I had been told that they both had gunshot wounds to their heads. And then from there, we located the 911 caller, Mr. Alex Murdaugh.
Now, did you know Everybody's referring to as Paul and Maggie. Did you know Paul Murdaugh and or Maggie Murdaugh?
I did not.
Had you ever seen them before you saw them laying dead on the ground?
No.
At that point, did you walk any of the rest of the scene?
Not at that point.
Well, tell the folks what you did do after that.
We located Mr. Murdaugh, Alex, standing at the back of there was his Suburban, and then there was, I believe his brother Randy had arrived at the scene at that point, and they were standing behind Randy's truck, so they couldn't see the scene anymore. So we approached him and asked if he would speak with us. He introduced the man standing next to him as his personal attorney, Danny Henderson, and he agreed to speak with us. By this point, it had started to rain, so we utilized Agent Owen's vehicle to do the interview.
Now, before we get to that, had you made any other observations about bullet holes or shell casings prior to that?
Yes, there were shell casings in front of Maggie's head area, in front and to the left on the ground. In between, there was like a gravel area in between the two buildings.
Had you seen what's been referred to as the feed room?
Yes.
Okay, what did you observe in there?
Inside the feed room, I did observe body matter that had been on the ceiling, as well as covered in items inside the feed room. There was shotgun wadding on the floor inside the feed room, as well as droplets of blood on the concrete.
Did you see any holes in the window?
Yeah, there was a window to the back of the feed room that had several holes in it.
I want to skip the statement for a second. All right.
Mm-hmm.
After you took the statement, we're going to get into that. Did you go back and look at the scene with either Captain Chapman, and I say the scene, the shelters, the dog kennels? Did you and or Captain Chapman or anybody else have an opportunity to go back and look?
I did.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen, first of all, why you did that and what were your observations, please, ma'am?
Well, it was such a large scene. I decided to canvas the outer part of the scene, and while I was doing that, keep in mind it was late at night, it was dark, so we had flashlights. So while I was doing that, I noted some what appeared to me to be fresh shoe impressions in a sandy part of the shed on the left side of the hangar, what we're describing as the hangar. In between some tractors in the wall of the shed, there was several fresh shoe impressions.
And when you say fresh shoe impression, kind of obvious, but what does that mean?
It means that they had been left fairly recently.
What did they appear to you to be?
They look like a flat sandal, flip-flop type shoe, not particularly large in size, just flat.
Were they one set of footprints or two based on your observation?
It was one set of prints that looked like it went down one direction and possibly came back.
No doubt about that in your mind?
No doubt about that.
So if you watch me now, was it like one set of prints going this way?
Yes.
And then it looked like one set of prints coming back this way?
Yes, because they did overlap each other a little bit.
And who was with you when you were looking at this?
I was by myself initially, and then I found my supervisor, Captain Chapman, and showed him what I had found.
Where were y'all walking when you were looking at the prints?
We had made the decision at that point, due to the type of incident that it was, and we didn't really know what we had yet, to follow the footprints and see if there was any other additional evidence and find out where that person may have been trying to go. So what we did is we stayed to the left side of the shoe prints, closest to the tractors, and followed the prints down. Noted that they stopped at the end of the building, turned around, and came back.
And I'm going to show you what's entered the state's 194. Is that what you're just referring to?
No.
Okay. What does this depict?
That depicts several what appear to be boot prints on as well.
Is this the same path y'all walked?
Yes.
Okay. And let me show you. State's 195, do you recognize this?
Yeah, those are the flat, just the flat ones, impressions.
Promise you I can't. Can we start now, Mike? Please. I'll show you what's marked States 22. Do you recognize this, and does it relate to your testimony?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, States 22 without objection.
Submit it.
Are we on? I'm sorry. Let me go back to what's just been entered as States 22. You said you recognize that. What is that, Detective?
That's in front of the hangar, the building. So Maggie would be to the right, and the shoe impressions I'm referring to would be on the left.
And getting a little closer view on States 194.
Yes, that's the left side of the hangar.
Can you show in this picture the prints you were talking about, the footprints?
Yes.
Can you come down here with the judge's permission? Sure, please.
Flat ones. It's hard to see. There's a big glare.
Okay. Let me put it in States 195 too, Detective.
Yeah, these flat impressions, these flat ones. Can you all see?
Were those foot impressions you saw that night? The flat ones?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any other foot impressions beside the flat ones that you saw?
No.
Okay. On evening of June 7th, early morning of June 8th of 2021?
That's correct.
You're positive?
Positive.
I took this off first. And again, when you and the captain walked, how far were you from the sandals?
A foot to the left.
Don't take this any bad way. But could some of those other prints be yours or the captain's, or you don't
It's
know?
possible.
Okay. Now you were and I'm going to do this without putting it up. This is one of those pictures that we've uncovered, but I'm going to show you States 7. You're a lady.
Yes, sir.
You know what women's shoes look like?
Yes, sir.
Did you go and look at Maggie's shoes she was wearing?
I did,
Okay. Why'd you do that?
to see if they matched the flat impressions I had seen.
And were they similar to you?
Very similar.
And States 200, do you recognize those?
Yes.
And what are those?
Those are the sandals Miss Murdaugh had on.
And did they appear to be similar to the footprints you saw?
Yes, very.
Now, did Mr. Harpootlian or one of the investigators contact you about these footprints?
He did,
When was that?
a few weeks ago.
And did they send you a picture of them?
They did.
Okay, was it the pictures we just put up?
It was.
And did you tell them that, well, what'd you tell them when they sent you that?
That those were not my impressions.
That those weren't your impressions? The
Correct.
Volunteered to talk to them?
I did.
Sent you a picture of the shoes?
Yep.
You told them those weren't mine?
Correct.
All right, let's get back to, I think you said, Mr. On the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh, the defendant had said introduced you to who before you started the interview?
Danny Henderson said he was his personal attorney.
His personal attorney.
Yes,
Did he want his attorney in the car with you?
he did.
Okay. And I believe you said it was raining?
Yes, sir.
So what did y'all do to get out of the elements?
We sat inside Agent Owens with sled inside his vehicle.
And please tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury specifically where everybody was sitting.
Agent Owen was in the driver's seat. Alex Murdaugh was in the front passenger seat. I sat directly behind him, and then Mr. Henderson sat to my left.
Please listen to me. Was that the first time you met Alex Murdaugh?
It was.
Did he appear to you to be under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or any other intoxicant when you saw him?
He did not.
Did he appear to you to understand your questions and Special Agent David Owens' questions when y'all were talking to him?
He did.
Were his answers to either you or Agent Owens timely?
Yes.
Were they subject matter appropriate?
Yes, they were.
Did you have any trouble understanding the defendant when you were talking to him?
I did not.
Did he appear to have any trouble understanding you and responding to your questions?
He did not. He may have asked twice to repeat a question, but he was understanding what was being discussed.
And on the 911 tape, how long had Alex Murdaugh told the 911 operator it had been since he'd seen Maggie Murdaugh?
He's estimated 1.5 to 2 hours.
To 2 hours. 1.5, 2 hours. And on this tape, your interview, what had he said about seeing Maggie? When was the last time he'd seen Maggie Murdaugh?
That she about 2 hours.
Did he say he took a nap?
He took a nap
Did he say where he went after that?
to check on his mother with Alzheimer's in Hampton.
Okay. Did you find that unusual?
I did.
Why?
Just the time of night.
Why?
With her being an Alzheimer's patient, they tend to be worse at night, so I seemed it was strange to go visit.
In your interview, in Agent Owens' interview, did the defendant Alex Murdaugh tell you he tried to turn Paul over?
He did.
And did he say whether or not he had tried to check Paul's pulse and or Maggie's pulse?
He stated he tried to check both.
What did Mr. Murdaugh, the defendant, Alex Murdaugh, say about the phone, if anything, that was in Paul's possession?
He stated his phone popped out of his pocket
When
he tried to check his pulse.
did he try to turn him over?
That's what he said.
I've got a transcript here, but at the end of the video, toward the end of the interview, did Mr. Murdaugh say again he tried to turn over his son, Paul Murdaugh?
He did.
That he tried to check him?
That's what he said.
And I know I asked you at the first, but I may not have done it too eloquently. Did he first tell you he tried to turn him over?
Yes, he did.
And I figured it out?
Yes,
And his cell phone popped out of his pocket?
that's correct.
And everybody heard it, but then something with it thinking maybe then I put it back down really quickly, then I went, and you can't really understand the rest of it.
Yes.
Have you ever moved dead weight?
I have.
And before I get to it, did the defendant ever tell you he'd been down to the kennels that night in this interview?
No.
After his nap, where did he say he went?
Went to check on his mother in Hampton.
With the court's permission, I'd like for the detective to come down, please, Judge.
Yes.
Detective, now I'm going to get what you won't block, and I won't block her. Did you see? I got to get back over here. Did the defendant tell you he tried to get the pulse of his son, Paul Murdaugh?
He did.
Did he tell you where he tried to get the pulse?
He did not, just that he tried to turn him.
Say that last
He
thing.
tried to turn him.
And he told you he tried to turn him more than once, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Objection leading, Your Honor.
How many times did he tell you he tried to turn him?
Twice.
I think you've testified you tried to lift dead weight, right?
I have.
Can you describe what's around Paul Murdaugh?
Blood, brain matter.
And if you were to, where's his hands?
Underneath his body.
If you were to check the pulse of his hands, how would you do it?
You would have to try to lift him up and get his arms out from under him.
Underneath
Correct.
and roll it.
Correct.
By the way, where's his phone?
It's laying on the backside of his shorts.
Right there. Popped out, he said.
Yes.
Is that his brain?
That is.
Mr. Harpootlian said blown out of his head.
Correct.
If you tried to take the pulse at the neck, how would you do it?
You would have to try to lift his shoulder to get access his neck.
This way?
Correct.
Whether you're this way or this way. Well,
Correct.
either underneath or under the head. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that right? Is that-
Yes.
I'm sorry.
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 You have to yell.
When you saw Alex Murdaugh, when you first came up to him, y'all just I'm about to
Is she going to sit down?
Okay, stay up here, good. That's fine.
Why are you questioning her not in the chair?
Well, I made sure something again. Judge, I apologize. I see you just go back and sit down.
Thank you.
When you first saw Alex Murdaugh at the car, did you observe him?
I did.
Why?
Just to make mental notes of what he was wearing and how he looked.
What were your mental notes?
That he was clean.
Say that again.
That he was clean.
When you were in the car with him, you were behind him.
I was.
Did you observe his hands?
I did.
Did you see his arms?
I did.
And when you were out on the side of the road beforehand, did you see his shirt,
I did.
his pants,
Yes.
his shoes?
Yes.
Now, when you were at the scene, when you first got there, did you see any footprints in the blood?
No.
Did you see any knee prints in the blood?
No.
Anywhere around the body?
No.
Did you look at his shoes?
I did.
What kind of shoe? Alex Murdaugh shoes. What kind of shoes were they?
They were like an athletic tennis shoe.
Did you see anything that appeared to be blood on his shoe?
I did not.
I want you to look at the ladies and gentlemen of this jury. Did you see what appeared to be blood on Alex Murdaugh's hands?
I did not.
On his arms?
No.
On his shirt?
None.
On his shorts?
No.
On his shoes?
I did not.
How long was this after the 911 call?
2 hours, 2 to 3 hours.
All this fresh in his mind?
Yes.
How would you describe the defendant's hands when you saw him when you were interviewing him? How would you describe his hands?
They were clean. Clean.
How would you describe his arms?
They were clean.
How would you describe his t-shirt?
Clean.
How would you describe his shorts?
Clean.
How would you describe his shoes?
They were clean.
Now, if you just listen to my questions, I'm not going to lead you. I just want to ask you one final question. Is the individual in this courtroom who told you he tried to take the pulse of Maggie and Paul, is the individual in this courtroom who told you he tried to turn Paul over, told you that once, twice? Is the individual in this courtroom that you took that statement from, that we saw in this video, in this courtroom, and is the individual you described as clean from head to toe in this courtroom?
Yes, he is.
Please point him out for the jury.
He's sitting at the defense table wearing a grayish-brown jacket and a white shirt.
Your Honor, we'd like the record to reflect she has pointed out the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
It does.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Now, this guy, he is the real life version of Matlock, right? Just phenomenal job here of hammering down really the one fact he wanted to display in all of this questioning. And that was how clean Murdaugh was. Look, y'all, you got 2 dead bodies. You got brain matter all over the place. Ceilings, walls, floor. You got blood everywhere. And if you're Alex Murdaugh, you've made this claim that you turned your dead son over or attempted to turn him over, and that's how his cell phone fell out of his pocket and all those sorts of things, which, if you'll remember, Metter did do a great job of describing how hard it would be to turn someone over that is deceased. He referred to it as dead weight. But he also made that comment, his shoes are clean, his hands are clean, his shirt is clean, no blood anywhere on him. And y'all, that's not only strange, it's impossible, in my view. So the defense, they got their work cut out for them. And here they are trying to unravel the prosecution's examination.
Detective Cross, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jim Griffin.
Detective Rutland.
Jim
Rutland.
Rutland, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My name is Jim Griffin, and I represent Alex Murdaugh.
Mm-hmm.
You had testified on direct examination a moment ago that it was, you believe, somewhat unusual for Mr. Murdaugh to go visit his mother as late as 9:06 on a Monday evening. You recall testifying?
I do.
And you were sitting in the car when he was being interviewed, and you recall him saying that his father, Mr. Randolph Murdaugh, had just been put in the hospital that very day.
That's correct.
And that it was an unusual day because Mr. Randolph Murdaugh was not with Ms. Libby Randolph, and she gets anxious when that occurs. You remember that?
I remember him saying
Okay.
something along those lines.
And in that context, you don't criticize a son who goes to visit his mother who has early onset dementia on the very day in the afternoon that the father is admitted to the hospital. You're not here to criticize him for that, are you?
No, I didn't criticize. I just made a mental note that was interesting.
Okay. And you walked the crime scene when you arrived, and you made some mental notes and observations that you subsequently recorded in a report, did you not?
I did.
And one of the things that you mentally noted and then subsequently reported was that there was a tremendous amount of blood spatter in the feed room area and around where Paul was murdered. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there was brain matter and organic matter all about the place where Paul was murdered, correct?
That's correct.
And I think you even described that there was matter, that blood that went up to the ceiling and through the door and spatter everywhere, right?
That's correct.
And you also told the jury that Alec was clean. And you're referring to his shirt was clean, correct?
Correct.
His shorts were clean, correct?
Correct.
You remember the litany of Mr. Metters? Shorts, shirts, shoes were clean, correct?
That's correct.
He was clean, correct?
To my visual eye, he was clean, yes.
And to your visual eye, it did not look like he had just blown his son's head off in the confines of a feed room where splatter is everywhere. Isn't that correct?
I didn't say that.
Well, let me ask you, in your mind's eye, that night on June 7th, did he look like someone had just blown his son's head off, spatter going everywhere?
Again, I can't say that for sure. A lot of things would come into play to affect that. Distance is one of them.
Well, certainly if he appeared that way on the night of June the 7th, you, a sworn law enforcement officer, you would have initiated process to take him into custody, I suspect, wouldn't you?
No, that was not my role that evening. I was just assisting.
Well, one of the things you did that evening, Ms. Rutland, was you obtained a search warrant, did you not?
I did.
And that was your first official duty in connection with this double homicide investigation, right?
That's correct.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 3, Your Honor. I shared it with Mr. Meadows during the break and asked the witness to identify it. You recognize Exhibit 3?
I do. This is the search warrant I got that night.
Your Honor, we've moved Exhibit 3 into evidence this time, I believe without objection.
No objection.
It's admitted.
I have it. So, tell the jury, please, Exhibit 3 is, well, first, let's just talk about a search warrant. What is a search warrant?
It grants us the right to search a certain item that may be potential evidence in a case.
And this search warrant was for what property?
4147 Moselle Road in Islandton, County of Colleton, State of South Carolina.
And it covers the whole roughly 1,700 acres, or the whole property, does it not?
That is correct.
And it covers the house, the residence where you went into the foyer, right?
Correct.
It covers all the outbuildings, correct?
Correct.
And it covers, and it gives you the right to seize any type of evidence, correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to see if I can get Mr. Elmo to work. Can you turn it on, please? I've got to turn sideways. All right. Let's see if we can read that document. Is there light you can turn on here? That's much better. And can we zoom in it? All right. Okay. Got it. Thank you. So, and this is the search warrant, right?
Yes, it is.
And it says description of premises to be searched. And here it's 4147 Moselle Road, Islandton. And then there's a PIN number. What's the PIN number?
That's a property identification number that's assigned to every parcels of real property within the county. It's set by the tax office.
And it says the property to be searched are any residences, vehicles, outbuildings, kennels, or sheds, right?
That is correct.
And then it says the description of the property to search and to be seized, and that's under the description of property, right?
Correct.
And you prepared this document for the magistrate to sign.
I did.
And here says evidence that may be used or taken during the commission of a crime of homicide to include but not limited any item, tool, clothing, gloves, mask, hats, hoodies, shoes, boots, jewelry, firearms, ammunition, shell casings, gunshot residue, weapons, identification documents, any paperwork, etc. It says any evidence inside vehicles on the property, any evidence found in outbuildings or sheds, any tire, shoe impressions, any and all DNA to include but not limited to fingerprints, touch DNA, etc. Any drugs, narcotics, drugs, paraphernalia, any and all cellular phones, phone records to include incoming, outgoing calls, text messages, voice messages, etc. Then it goes on to talk about photographs and whatnot. It's all encompassing, isn't it?
It is.
And this is basically as broad of a search warrant that you draft because it's a homicide investigation and it gives you carte blanche on the property of the crime scene, correct?
That's correct.
And with the search warrant, you had the authority to go in the house and look for unclean, dirty clothes, did you not?
I wasn't in that capacity that evening. I was assisting.
Well, the search warrant provided that authority to law enforcement, did it not?
It would have, yes.
And you mentioned that you got into the law enforcement business because you're CSI TV junkie of sorts. Did I understand you to say that?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, and you've seen CSI shows where they go and they look in the drains of showers or sinks and to see if blood residue had been recently flushed through there. That's possible, is it not?
It could be.
And that's just not on TV. I mean, that's skills that SLED's crime team has available to them, correct?
I don't know what they have available, but
Okay.
that would be a crime scene unit question.
Right. The and actually there were the clean clothes that Alex Murdaugh was wearing that night. They were seized, were they not?
Yes.
Okay, and the clean shoes were seized, correct?
Yes.
And the clean shirt was seized, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Okay. But that you were in the house when that happened, but you didn't collect the clothes, right?
I did not collect anything. I stood by in the foyer.
And who did the collection? Do you recall?
Special Agent Owen.
And when was he assisted by anybody?
I was just standing by. They went to a back bedroom, and I was in the foyer area. It was like an open floor plan.
And do you recall how? Do you recall what Mr. Owen, Detective Owen, Special Agent Owen, apologize, Detective Owen, Special Agent Owen, did you observe what he collected the clothes in?
I did not.
Did he collect all the clothes and put them in one paper bag?
I don't recall.
Now, the jury heard the complete video audio of the interview with Alex Murdaugh on the evening of early morning hours of June the 8th, and yet you were asked to repeat some of the things that he said, and I want to, I mean, the tape speaks for itself. I don't want anyone to misconstrue your testimony, so I just want to ask you, are you saying that Mr. Murdaugh tried to turn his son over 2 times on that tape, or that on 2 occasions he described one incident that he tried to turn his son over?
The latter that he explained 2 different times.
So in answer to your question, if anyone walked away thinking that Alex Murdaugh told you that he tried to turn him over 2 times, that would just be mistaken, and we've now clarified it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you never asked, or Special Agent Owen never asked Mr. Murdaugh how he tried to turn his son over, correct? That's what.
Correct.
And so you see Mr. Meadows crawling around on the floor down here as trying to reenact something, but that night he never was asked specifically, what did you do to try to turn your son over, correct?
That's correct. We did not ask that.
And that night he was not asked specifically how the phone popped out of his pocket while you were trying to turn him over, correct?
Correct.
And that night he was not asked specifically how far were you able to move Paul, if at all, when you tried to flip him over, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, did he really even say that I was trying to flip him over to check his pulse?
I'd have to check the transcript, but I believe he said something along those lines.
Or did he tell you where he tried to check Paul's pulse?
He did not.
So we don't know from your interview, or Special Agent Owen's interview, how he tried to turn him over, how the phone popped out, or at least how Alex describes it, because he wasn't asked, and where on Paul's body he attempted to check his pulse, correct?
Correct.
And you were asked questions about whether there was knee prints and footprints by Paul's body next to his body, right?
Yes, I was asked that.
And did you do such a forensic analysis or investigation to see if there were boot prints or footprints around Paul's body?
I looked with my eyes.
And were you aware that before you got there? Well, what time did you get there?
Can I check my notes?
Sure.
Okay.
You can take this down through Mr. Elmo. I think cut through there.
12:22 a.m. I was on scene.
Okay, 12:22 a.m. And Paul's body and Maggie's bodies were covered up with a sheet, but still present, correct?
Correct.
So when you were looking at Paul's body, just observing whether there are footprints near him, you couldn't see right next to his body because of the sheet, could you?
The sheet was mostly on his body, not on the cement on the ground next to the body.
Was it a fitted sheet?
No, but it wasn't a queen sheet either.
Okay. Then jury has seen photos of the sheet. Were you aware that Captain Chapman and others went around Paul's body and lifted the sheet up to see if there was a gun underneath him?
Not at the time I was at the scene, no.
Well, I take it you did not observe their footprints anywhere in the area either then, right?
Not that I recall.
And you said that Alex's pants were clean. Remember saying that?
I remember saying that.
What color pants did he have on?
Khaki.
All right. And are you aware of any forensic testing that had been done to the pants to see whether there was blood on the pants
That night?
subsequently?
No, there was nothing done that night forensically.
That night, nothing was done forensically.
Not before I interviewed him, no.
Right. And you just did not observe any blood on his pants or in his pocket?
No, just simply speaking with him like this, looking him up and down, I did not see any blood on him.
And he didn't look like someone who had just been within feet of blowing Paul's head off, right?
Again, I can't say that. There's so many different factors that you would have to take into account.
Now, you did a lot more, I believe, that night. After you left, well, let's go back. When you got to the scene, you partnered up with Agent Owen, correct?
That is correct.
And you saw inside the shed, and you observed there was wadding on the floor near his feet, Paul's feet.
Correct.
And when we say wadding, what are you talking about?
The internal components of a shotgun shell.
And then you saw in the rear window of the shed there were several holes, right?
That is correct.
And you described in your report that you saw large amounts of blood spatter and brain skull matter were on the door to the shed and on items within the storage building. You saw all that, right?
That's correct.
And then you went and examined Maggie's body, did you not?
I wouldn't say examined. I would just say I looked at her.
And one of the things that you noticed when you were looking at Maggie's body, I believe, you said you noticed there are a few clumps of her hair and a broken earring were located near a UTV tire, right?
That is correct.
And what's UTV tire?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by UTV?
All-terrain vehicle, it's like a four-wheeler, side-by-side.
Okay. You mentioned that you told investigators that worked for me and Mr. Harpootlian that the boot prints were not yours in these photos, right?
That is correct.
But now you told the jury that the boot prints are yours.
That's incorrect. Those are not my boot prints.
Okay. Whose boot prints are they?
I don't know.
Oh, so okay. That's why I get to do this. So,
Objection to his comments.
Yes, let's pose questions.
so you don't know whose boot prints those are.
No.
Now, one thing about this search warrant that I asked you about earlier, it was. Do you have it up there?
I couldn't remember if I gave it back to you or
I
not.
don't think you did.
Okay.
That's okay. It was never executed, was it?
I handed this off to SLED agents once I was at the scene. Thank you.
You said you handed the search warrant off to SLED agents.
I did.
Okay. But to your knowledge, was it ever executed?
Yes, it was.
Or you think it was executed?
It was.
And why do you say that?
Because the SLED crime scene unit, I was present while they were processing the scene and executing the search warrant.
And so there are two ways that law enforcement can get access to property. One is through a search warrant and one's by consent. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, are you aware that Mr. Murdaugh gave SLED, Colleton County, any law enforcement, FBI, carte blanche consent to search his property?
That wasn't relayed to me. I was tasked with getting a search warrant, so I did.
Okay, and once a search warrant is executed, a return is filed with the magistrate who issued it, right?
That's correct.
And you never filed a return on that search warrant, right?
Do you have, like I said, it was given to SLED, so.
So we'll find out more about that. But to your knowledge, I mean, you didn't file a return, that's all you can say, right?
I don't recall. I have to check my notes.
You heard on the tape, you heard Mr. Murdaugh say, you can do anything, look for anything. Do you remember him just giving consent to whatever you need?
As far as speaking with him, yes, I remember him saying that.
And you walked back through the crime scene one last time before you cleared the area on the morning of the 8th, is that right?
You could say that. We were walking around the whole night and staying out of the way of the crime scene unit.
Were you there after the crime scene unit left?
No, I was not. They were still processing when I left.
Oh. Do you know whether or not the crime scene unit left shotgun pellets behind in the feed room?
I have no knowledge of any of that.
20, 30, even more shotgun pellets left behind in the feed room.
Your Honor,
Were you aware of that?
said she had no objection.
Objection is sustained.
On Thursday, June 10th, 2 days, 3 days Thursday, June the 10th. You went with SLED, a number of SLED agents and law enforcement agents, went to meet with Mr. Murdaugh, Mr. Murdaugh's brothers, Randy and John Marvin, Mr. Murdaugh's son, and they all agreed to meet, and y'all found a location in outside of Varnville, I believe. You remember doing that?
I do. I remember doing that.
And that was during that, I believe you and a SLED agent interviewed Mr. Randy Murdaugh, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Randy Murdaugh agreed to allow the download of his cell phone, correct?
That's correct.
And gave consent, right?
He did.
And Mr. Alex Murdaugh, to your knowledge, gave consent to download his cell phone, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
And Mr. John Marvin Murdaugh did the same, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Buster Murdaugh did the same, correct?
He did.
And everyone gave a voluntary interview that day, to your knowledge, right?
They did.
And then a little bit later, on the Wednesday, June 16th, you assisted SLED when they went out to the Moselle property and went diving, searching for, well, let me ask you. When you assisted SLED dive team, did you assist SLED dive team on June 16th, 2021?
I did.
And with a search of the Moselle property, focusing on waterways, ponds, and Salkehatchie River access points for evidence from the crime, correct?
That's correct.
Were you looking for the firearms that were used to murder Maggie and Paul?
We were looking for anything that could have been linked to their murders.
And then you utilized ATVs and canvassed the entire 1,700 acres of land.
I did. That was my assignment that day.
And once again, that was done with consent by Mr. Murdaugh, correct?
That is correct.
And then went back the next day and dove another pond on the property. You remember doing that?
I didn't dive, but I was standing by, yes.
You were there?
Yes.
And again, that was with consent, right?
Correct.
And then you were given consent, and you did a search of a white F-250 pickup that Paul normally drove, right?
That is correct.
And while you were there, Mr. Davis shows up, and Mr. Davis, you understood to be the caretaker for the dogs, right?
Yes, that's what he explained his job title was at Moselle.
And that, did you observe him doing his work that day?
I did.
Did you watch him wash down the dog runs?
I don't remember that part.
But you were able to look at his tire marks and make an assessment as to whether they appeared to match the tire marks that were seen under the shed portion next to the old airplane hangar, right?
That's correct. He parks under the canopy next to the UTV.
And then on Friday, June the 18th, you had a meeting and you looked at some photos, I believe crime scene photos and autopsy photos at SLED, correct?
I did.
And you made a mental note and you put it in your record that you noticed a few strands of what appeared to be brown hair, unable to determine the length from the photo in Maggie's hands and fingers, right?
That is correct.
And you thought that possibly was indication of a struggle, that Maggie had grabbed someone, had their hair in her hands, right?
I didn't say that in my report, no.
Well, so why did you note it in your report?
Because it was an observation.
Well, you also noticed in your report that there were some injuries, what appeared to be to Paul's face, that like he had been some type of struggle, right?
I noted what to me could have been scratches or a bruise on his cheek.
And we heard some testimony yesterday about a bolo on the lookout for a white pickup that Paul normally drives. I mean, that pickup was found the next morning, correct?
That's correct. It was broken down.
Yeah, and you learned through your investigation that Paul had switched vehicles with his uncle John Marvin, and John Marvin was rushing to Moselle when he got the phone call in Paul's truck, and it broke down on the side of the road.
Yeah, that's correct. It was I believe Mr. Randolph struggled to get in and out of the truck.
Did Colony County Sheriff's Office put out a statement to the press on the morning of June the 8th that there's no need to public to be alarmed?
I don't believe that came from our office. It did not come through CID for approval. I never seen that press release.
So was Alex Murdaugh, your assisting SLED, night of June the 7th, morning June the 8th, was Alex Murdaugh a suspect?
That night, everybody was a suspect.
Everybody? Can you be more specific? Who else were suspects besides?
Well, there was reasons we were asking certain questions. Who his best friend is, who, their routine each day. There were so many different scenarios it could have been that night. So, in my view, everybody was a suspect at that point.
Including Alex?
Including Alex.
Can you see that, Ms. Rutland?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let's just stop right there. You see how far that sheet is on either side of Paul's body there?
At this point in time, yes, I see how it looks.
Is that roughly how far it was across Paul's body when you got there?
No, because I could see the top of his head.
Well, I'm talking about the width of his body. Was it that far across?
I don't recall how it was because I could see parts of his body, but it was still on him.
Okay. Did you notice any footprints of the agent there inside the kennel?
No, I believe he's standing on the
In the food room?
in the feed room.
Right.
No, but it was starting to rain.
Was that how far across the sheet was when you observed Paul's body?
I don't remember. Like I said, when I got there, there was SLED agents as well as deputies standing around the scene, and I wasn't sure what had happened before I got there. I don't recall how the sheet was.
Well, was the sheet on Paul's body the entire time you were walking the crime scene?
No, eventually it was removed when the crime scene unit was ready to process his body.
And I just want to clear up. When you said Alec was wearing khakis, were you referring to shorts or long pants?
Shorts.
Those are shorts he was wearing?
Yes.
Are those khakis or green?
Khaki style, green.
Okay. All right. That's all. You can take it now. That's all the questions we have, Your Honor.
And redirect.
Mr. Griffin asked you about some things you did after your interview the following days,
He did.
and you had mentioned a search warrant was executed. Were you working with SLED after June 8th? He's asked you about them. And did you work with them in executing search warrants,
I did.
specifically on June 9? And who were you working with?
Special Agent Owen.
And I think did Mr. Griffin ask you, there was a truck on the side of the road that went back to her brother John Marvin?
That's correct.
So that was the white truck
Yes.
that was on the side of the road?
Yes.
And who did it belong to?
John Marvin.
Okay, and that was off the property of Moselle?
That's correct.
Okay. So that has nothing to do with this case as far as suspect and this killing, does it?
No, it did not. We processed to rule it out.
What's that last thing?
We processed it to rule it out.
Okay. And he asked you about meeting with these folks and them talking to you. You were working with SLED doing that, weren't you?
I was.
SLED was investigating this case.
Yes.
Getting swabs. Getting swabs from folks? In general,
Yeah.
getting swabs?
I was present when swabs were taken, yes.
I'm not trying to say
Yeah.
you took them. I'm
No,
just following up on his
that's
question.
correct, yeah.
Were you present when interviews were taken?
I was present, yes.
And who was leading those interviews?
SLED.
Who was in charge?
SLED.
Were they investigating?
They were investigating.
Did you assist SLED with the initial timeline on phone calls?
I did.
On June 12th, did you assist SLED in removing an internal computer black box of a Chevy Suburban?
I did, by standing by.
On June 14th, did you assist SLED in obtaining a search warrant for Maggie Murdaugh's Mercedes?
I did.
And was Lieutenant Kent in charge of that?
He was. And
Was SLED investigating?
SLED was investigating.
Was that what's referred to as the blue box?
Black box, I
Black
believe.
box? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Were you with SLED when Maggie Murdaugh's Mercedes was towed?
I was.
Did y'all have a search warrant for that?
We did.
I think he asked you, were you with SLED when ponds were searched in the area?
I was.
That's June 16th, would you dispute that, 2021?
No, that's correct.
And I think Mr. Griffin asked you about a truck that a Mr. Davis was driving out of the shed. Were you able to confirm that the tire tracks in the shed were his
I did, by looking at them.
by looking at them?
Yes.
And I think Mr. Griffin asked you, did Mr. Davis say he was in and out of there a couple times a day?
Twice a day, yes.
So those tracks inside the shelter were whose?
The dog caretaker, Mr. Davis.
And I think he asked you about water. Just remind me, the night you were there, did you see water around the bodies?
I did.
Okay. He asked you about some injuries, I think, which you had noted in your report. How did Paul fall?
Face down at an angle outside the feed room.
On what?
On his hands and arms.
Okay. But his face hit what?
The gravel.
Mr. Griffin asked you about how many times the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh, had mentioned or turned his son Paul's body on page 2 of the transcript or toward the front. Actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You remember him saying that?
Yes.
You know, I tried to turn him over and I don't know, I figured it out.
Yes.
And his cell phone popped out
Correct.
and I tried to do something, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down.
Correct.
Were his words, I think I tried to turn him over.
Yes.
And later on, I tried to turn him and then I tried to check him.
Correct.
I tried to turn him.
Correct.
He asked you about the sheet on the body. Did you see the front or the top of Paul's head?
I did.
Okay. And he asked you about the sheet over that body. I want to ask you about a sheet. When you saw Richard Alexander Murdaugh, did he have a sheet over him?
He did not.
Could you see his face, his hands, his body, his pants, and his shirt?
I could.
Did those clothes appear to be fresh,
They did.
like they'd just come out of the laundry?
It could be.
So that guy there, I'm sure, y'all, he's a fine lawyer, but I was not impressed with him at all. And really throughout this whole trial, I wasn't impressed with him. He totally got smoked by the prosecution with this witness. I mean, all he did with this was confirm that Laura Rutland investigated the case. He tried to make a run at accusing her of locking into Alex Murdaugh as a suspect right from the start, I guess. But in my opinion, he failed miserably. So the death nail in the coffin for this exchange for sure was the fact that Murdaugh was squeaky clean after claiming he checked for pulses, etc., on that very bloody crime scene. It just couldn't happen, in my opinion. And they did a great job of painting that picture to the jury. But that doesn't mean the defense doesn't have some wins in all of this. And as we go through the trial, we're going to cover some of those. Now, we're going to speed this one up like we did today going forward. As I said, I'm going to note all the witness testimony, but just give a brief insight into those that maybe were not as pertinent to the case. I'll only provide the deep dives into those that had really a major impact on the outcome of the case going forward. I want to thank all of you for listening, supporting, sharing. I can't tell you how much it helps and how much I love each and every one of you for doing that. And it's getting close to Christmas, so I hope everybody's enjoying the holiday times with family and friends. I will be releasing some episodes next week, so look for those. And until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.